Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about consistency and building consistency in your setup. It's amazing how often we search for consistency in our swing, but don't actually search for consistency in our setup position. And obviously standing to the golf ball correctly every time is one of the ways to actually hopefully produce a consistent golf swing. The simplest thing is just get yourself a couple of alignment sticks and get them on the ground, especially if you're hitting from grass, not hitting from mats, so you're getting some kind of feedback about alignment, ball position, and so on. But we want to really kind of get a good understanding about our address position, what things should be really nailed on and what things are variable, what things can we actually change in our golf swing and basically fit to our particular golf swing. So I'd like to kind of take you through the setup position with a few kind of do's and don'ts and musts and must nots, so that you just simply understand a little bit more about the actual address position and what its actual job is. So I think probably the easiest thing is to start off with the grip. That's probably what you're all going to do to start off with when you get the club out of the bag, is take it in your hand. And if you're looking at the lead hand, really what we're looking for is to get the ball of the hand or the heel of the hand on top of the butt end of the grip. And you do this usually quite simply by taking it into your hand across from the seam of your trousers, and when you actually pick it up, then you should automatically feel the weight of the club underneath the heel of your hand. That will mean that your thumb is actually going down the back side of the grip. It's not actually on top of the grip. And you should have the feeling that if you were to let go with all of your fingers, with except for the forefinger, you can actually balance the club. In fact, it's quite well in the hand just by taking it correctly. There is this kind of line feeling that if you actually take an extension of the forefinger of the lead hand, it should kind of come up to your trail shoulder. That's another thing to look at, because we're looking about kind of where the hand is rotationally either away or towards it, around what we would call a strong or a weak grip. That has more to do with controlling club face. But the main thing is basically getting the heel of your hand on top of the golf swing, on top of the golf club every time. As far as the trail hand goes, it's more of a finger grip, whether you be putting a baseball grip on it, overlapping, interlocking. You've got to have the feeling that it's more in your fingers and not so much in the hand. You'll find again, you can either go weak by turning towards the target, strong by turning away. What's actually happening there, if you look at your hands, if your hands hang naturally, they don't actually hang at your side, they hang at a slight angle inclined to one another, and they're always trying to get back to there when you're swinging them around yourself. So if your hands turn too much rotated to the right, they will turn back to the left and the other way. So you can actually use that to make small changes to face angle at impact. If you find that your golf swing is delivering the club always with the face open, you can actually strengthen the grip, face closed the other way around. But what you want is a grip routine so that you are doing the same thing every time. And I will try to actually take the club out of the bag straight into the lead hand. Then as I approach the ball, I'll take it into the trail hand, and I'm actually got a correct grip by the time I actually get to the golf ball. Another thing you can check if you're looking for a totally neutral grip or one that slightly closes or opens the club, to control that, if you just straighten your hands through, you will actually find that by stretching your hands out, that the club face will twist in one direction or the other if you have a particularly strong or weak grip. So that would be a way of kind of reminding yourself your grip is correct for your swing. The next thing you really want to be looking at is your alignment. Now, here there is a difference between your alignment of your feet and your hips and the alignment of your shoulders. In fact, if you look at tour professionals, you will actually find that very few of them stand actually parallel to the target with both their feet and their shoulders. Most of the time they are slightly open to the target. That means that their feet will actually be pointing, for a right-handed player slightly left, and even their chest to a certain extent. But there are variations in this. The more important of the two, I would say, is your chest, because your chest is basically controlling your upper swing. That means that the direction that you are swinging the golf club is controlled more by your chest than it is by your feet. Your feet and hips have more to do with the hip rotation. If you have a closed stance, you will tend to be able to turn further back away from the target. If you have an open stance, it will be easier to turn through the target. And as I've said in other videos, especially for older golfers who are having problems getting enough hip rotation so that they're actually blocking their shoulder rotation because of inadequate hip rotation, you might actually find it better to be standing open to the target, which would then mean that your feet are not actually pointing in exactly the same direction as your shoulders. Once again, an alignment stick on the floor is a good way of controlling that, making sure that you're standing the same every time, and eventually you'll be able to move the sticks away and you will intuitively know if you're standing correctly or you're not. So my particular address position is usually very light, slightly open with my hips and with my feet. My shoulders are perfectly square to the target line. That's where I like to kind of set up to the target. Ball position, really, if you think about the ball position, really we're trying to kind of generate a swing almost around a circle which has got a low point, and this low point is actually going to be more or less across from your lead heel. That means relative to the target, because the trail arm is bending and straightening, the deepest point in the swing is not actually in the middle of your stance, it's slightly further forward. And that means that it will vary depending on when you straighten your trail arm. If you are straightening your trail arm early, the deepest point in your swing will move back in your stance. On the contrary, if you're getting a lot of hip rotation, a lot of shoulder rotation, you're open with your shoulders as you come through the ball, then the deepest point is moving forward. So although I'm sure a lot of you have heard your 7-iron should be in the middle of your stance, for advanced players who are getting a lot of hip rotation, that might not be the best place. You might find that you are actually hitting too much in the downswing on that kind of ball. It's important to understand that the positioning of impact on the golf club will depend on how much lean you have in impact, and therefore it could be, if you are actually hitting too much in the downswing because you've got so much rotation, too much lean, you're hitting too far up the club face. And on the contrary, if you've got the ball too far forward in your stance, you're coming in too flat for the loft on the club, you're actually hitting out the bottom of the club face, and this will change the energy transfer onto the golf ball. So it's very much worth your experimenting a little bit with ball position to see what ball position is giving you the best flight and the best energy transfer on the ball. And this is where it is very worthwhile maybe borrowing or renting a TrackMan or a Flight Scope system to actually check out what is your angle of attack and what kind of energy transfer are you getting on the ball, and is that variable depending on ball position. Generally, you'll say that a flatter face club with a steeper loft, so a lower loft, is going to have a flatter angle of attack, and a club that has actually more loft is going to have a steeper angle of attack in order to get the club up the face and a little bit more into the center in order to get the best energy transfer for that golf club. When we're talking about the stance, we're looking really, I would say, as a base, if you can stand around about hip width for your short game, pitching, chipping. Shoulder width is really, for me, the feeling of the heel standing under the armpits. I don't really go for the toes, because some people like myself will stand with both feet flared out. Others will have just one foot flared out. Others are standing totally straight. This is a bit up to your personal anatomy. and how you stand on the everyday, because your legs have got used to it, the different ligaments and bands have actually got used to the way you stand. So I wouldn't really play around with that unless you're really finding that there's a problem or you're having pain in particular joints or in particular ligaments when you're actually swinging a golf club. Otherwise, it's only the driver really where I've got the ball off my front foot and I'm actually widening the stance with my trail foot in order to get a little bit wider than shoulder width. Otherwise, really everything you can hit shoulder width stance is perfectly okay. But again, it's about getting the same stance every time. And finally, you've got basically your posture, and through your posture also the distance you're standing away from the golf ball. You want to try and get spine angle so that your spine is at more or less 100-degree angle to the angle that the golf club takes in the address position. And that's with the toe of the golf club very, very slightly off the ground. You're going to obviously an impact, because of the centrifugal forces, your hands will be higher at impact than they were in the address position in the majority of cases, unless you're doing a Deschambault and really kind of straightening that lead arm out, but there's very few players doing that. So usually you will need a slightly steeper lie angle. You don't need to have the club absolutely flat on the ground, but your upper body, and this is important for the plane of your swing, should be around about 100-degree angle to the shaft when you're in the address position. Now, then your arms, if you let them hang underneath your shoulders, will actually hang down, and usually you'll find with an iron that the hands are hanging more or less underneath your throat, around about a hand's width from your lead leg. As you get into the woods, you want to be standing a little bit further away, maybe the hands under your chin, and by the time you get to the driver, it's probably underneath your nose. Again, this is a variable, and I would definitely say you should be putting a bit of face tape on the iron regularly to see how your impact position is changing with the distance you stand away from the golf ball. But generally you can say that the more upright you're standing, the further away you want to be standing, because the centrifugal forces will be pulling your arms and the club away from the body, whereas the closer you are to the ball, the steeper your stance or your swing due to the shorter clubs, the more that the centrifugal forces are pulling the arms down, and therefore you want to be a little bit close to the golf ball with your irons and a little bit further away with your woods, which is contradictory to your spine angle, which actually means that if you're standing more upright, your arms are actually hanging more close to the body, and if you are more bent over, your hands are a little bit more further away from the body. Again, this is one of those things which are not a must-do. So you can see that there's a lot of variables, almost like a personal recipe, as I spoke about last time, for your particular golf swing. I would say you always want the heel of your lead hand on top, but whether your hand is rotated right or left on the shaft will be dependent on swing. You always want the feeling of the club being in your fingers, but again, your hand right or left rotated on the club face, dependent on your swing. Ball position, dependent on your swing. Are you releasing it late? Then you want the ball further forward. Are you releasing it too early? You want the ball further back in your stance. Distance from the golf ball also up to your swing dynamics. You want to be getting tape on the face and actually checking this out, making sure that you're getting the club ball regularly out of the sweet spot of the golf club to increase your energy transfer onto the golf ball and get consistent distance. And alignment, again, not an absolute kind of, we're not saying a must, but you want to be looking at the relationship between your shoulders and the target, your hips and the target, and your heels and the target. Where are they pointing? And what we want is consistency in these things. So you should be developing a routine which allows you to set up to the golf ball the same way every time, taking the different parts of the address position in the same order? Are you setting up with your grip, then your alignment, then your posture, then your ball position? Or is it a different number or a different sequence of events that you're actually doing there? Again, there isn't a right and a wrong, there's just a way that should repeat itself, and that way you are telling your habitual brain, hey, we're playing golf today. You've then got to get that to a point where it is just so natural for you, you're not thinking about it, you're going straight up to the golf ball, addressing it, doing everything right, and then you've got a good chance that the golf ball's going to go where you're aiming. Getting a consistent setup to the golf ball is really part of developing a consistent swing. If you're standing to the golf ball differently every time, your swing is not going to be the same every time. Logical stuff, but too often forgotten. If this helps you, smash that like button. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Big thank you again, as ever, to all of the patrons who support the site on a regular basis. If you'd like to become a patron, I'll leave a link below. We'll be back very shortly with the next one. Bye-bye.